Hello. Welcome to this brief moment of reflection on Emmanuel Presbyterian's YouTube channel. Welcome, be this the first time you're tuning in to us, or if you haven't missed a single episode yet. My name is Beth, and I help out with parish care at Emmanuel Presbyterian in Tacoma's North End. Welcome to this reflection for the third week of May 2020. Check out all of our offerings on our channel and become a subscriber while you're at it. It's free. Our webpage, ipctacoma.org, contains information on all other events. Some are virtual through Zoom, others are recorded and uploaded to YouTube. In the next few minutes, I'll tell you some stories about my very own guest house. I'll then share how my guests have changed my location in my inner landscape. And I'll explain why I think that's important for me, for you, and for the world. My hope is that my reflections may be helpful to you in these unsettling times. Here we go. In the meditation for Wednesday, May the 6th, Reverend Jenny Rake Morona invited us to use advice given by the poet Rumi. The idea contained in his poem, called The Guest House, is that since we're human, every day we'll have new, unexpected visitors show up. Guests such as joy, depression, meanness, or an awareness. From Rumi's poem, the dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Here's another invitation for you to watch for your guest visitors. Use a few quiet moments to reflect on what that guest brought and discern whether it placed you in a different region of your inner landscape. Let me explain. One recent day was just a piling on of minor irritations with the people I was video conferencing with and talking to on the phone. As the day dragged on, I just couldn't shake those annoyances or my cranky mood. I was definitely entertaining the guest of irritation that day, but I had a curiosity about it. Towards evening, I had an idea to give it all up to God in prayer. Now, I doubt anyone who knows me will ever remember hearing words like that come out of my mouth. I'm not sure where they came from that day, but never mind. I decided I'd try to give it all up to God. I almost stomped my way over to a chair in the corner to engage in this alien practice, but something pretty amazing happened. I got settled in, took a few deep breaths, started listing out my grievances to God, making my case for the right to be annoyed. But I didn't get too far. The image that immediately popped into my mind was the laughing Christ. Are you familiar with it? Now, I don't think that Jesus was laughing at me. Instead, I do believe he was laughing with me. Because as soon as this image flashed into my mind, I started chuckling, seeing just how ridiculous it had been for me to spend my day irritated by a few petty annoyances. I'm grateful to the Jesuit Father Eric, who first introduced me to this sketch, and more so to the artist Willis Wheatley, who created it in the early 70s while working for the United Church of Canada. He originally entitled it Christ Liberator. The visitor of annoyance I invited in helped me remember to not take myself too seriously. Thank you. guide from beyond, for checking my ego, clearing me for the new delight of a laugh at my own expense, and a sense of renewed connection with the friends and family who'd bothered me that day. My guests have also opened up larger insights. From the poem, the dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Well, I was definitely left with dark thoughts after a phone conversation with an old friend who does not share my political views. Talk turned to COVID and the handling of it by the federal government. I tossed out something I was sure was a fact about the issue, and there was a pause on the other end of the line. My friend gently stated that perhaps not all of the facts had been reported accurately in the media. That stunned me into silence, knowing that my friend was caring for a medically fragile spouse. Hadn't he been keeping up with the news? Wasn't he as incensed as I was at the lack of action by the feds? We changed topics, talked longer, but I was unsettled as I hung up the phone. My guest of dark thoughts stayed for a few days before I finally did some fact-checking at a favorite source of mine, PoliticalFact.com. Turns out my friend was right, and I was wrong. Thank you, guide from beyond, for checking my intellect that day. I was thankful I suffered that embarrassment after the fact, in private. That guest cleared me for a new delight of gratitude for that humbling realization and a new way of being in the world. Well, these personal insights are all well and good, but what's the big deal? Is this only self-indulgence and another self-improvement project? Here's where the ideas of Parker Palmer come in, his ideas about our inner landscapes. I first read The Courage to Teach over 20 years ago while studying education at Seattle University. Since our quarantine, a friend reintroduced me to it. The description of my inner landscape that follows is cobbled together from The Courage to Teach, Palmer's book, A Hidden Wholeness, and a recent online interview with him sent by another friend. Find the interview by searching for Reading Hope in Trying Times. Thank you, friends. Let me describe my inner landscape and why it's important to us and the world. The appearance I've imagined for my inner landscape may be different than the appearance you create for yours, but what our landscapes consist of will be very similar, since we're all human. I see my inner landscape as pretty extreme terrain, containing high, rocky, windy plateaus, as well as lush valleys, glowing green and smelling of the rich earth. Contradictory to most hikers' goals, I do not want the view from those high plateaus. You see, when I live at the altitude of any of those, I could be living at the altitude of my ego. I could be living at the altitude of my intellect. I could be living at the altitude of certainty that my own spiritual beliefs are the only valid ones, or that I know enough about God to stop growing my relationship with the divine mystery. I could be on a high altitude plateau of anger or fear, or that comfortable but temporary plateau of thinking I'm in control. My descent from those altitudes will be painful, but Father Richard Rohr and other wise people advise us to not get rid of the pain before we have learned what that pain has to teach us. But once I fall from a position of high altitude, however far, I'm closer to that lush groundedness of that sweet green valley. For me, that beautiful grassland represents the sacred ground where I know in my bones that I am a beloved child of God. That fragrant valley is where we can try to grasp the fact that the divine image of God is in each one of us, every one of us, regardless of politics. The lowlands of my inner landscape bring me closer to the truth that we are all one interrelated family. Many have tried to teach us this lesson about our interrelatedness. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, we are tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Suquamish and Duwamish Chief Siach, or in English, Chief Seattle. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together, all things connected. 200 years ago, founders of the Baha'i faith wrote, "The well-being of mankind, its peace and security, are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established." 2,000 years ago, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 17, "Because there is one loaf, we, who are many, are one body, for we all share the one loaf." That lesson of interrelatedness we just can't seem to grasp. Could it be that COVID-19 is a rogue relative sent to teach us that lesson once and for all? Dr. Ann Holmes Redding posed that idea in a recent talk. Back to our inner landscapes. I don't think that compassionately tending to them is merely self-indulgent, and here's why. Our location in our inner landscapes will determine how we interact with the outer world. Whether we operate from an altitude of ego or fear, or the groundedness of love, will affect our world, while the world affects us. When we courageously and compassionately welcome those worldly arrivals of sorrows, joys, and dark thoughts, and meet them at the door laughing, they will inform our inner landscape and lead us back to that lush valley where we're grounded in love and the realization that we're in the sacred web of mutuality. As we revel in that love, it will be reflected back out to the world as we wait and watch for the opportunity to do the next kind thing. I'll wrap this up now. Carrie Newcomer sings, "I can't change the whole world, but I can change the world I know. What's within 3 feet or so." I say, amen, Carrie. Perhaps we cannot change the whole world, but we have the potential to change the world of our inner landscape, even in these times of quarantine. Be on the lookout for your chance to simply do the next kind thing. I believe the ripple effect will magnify and amplify love in ways we can't imagine. That said, I can't help but get excited by the idea of changing the whole world. COVID-19 seems to be an enormous paradox. I mean, there have been so many lives and livelihoods lost. But on the other hand, that virus has drawn back the curtain and exposed some true ugliness in our systems. I'm thrilled at the talk of reimagining our civilization, letting go of things that foster inequality, letting come some new ways that will lift up all of God's people. But that's another subject for another day. My prayer is that if we can operate more from a grounded, loving place in our inner landscapes and operate less at an altitude of ego or fear or you fill in the blank, that grounded stance, that posture will help us be present when opportunities to do the next kind thing appear. Kind acts that will help retool, reinvent, and revitalize myself and my community, whether that community is 3 feet or 3,000 miles away. I'll leave you with a blessing that a friend of this community, Reverend Robin Myers, used at his church in Oklahoma City. That's the Mayflower Congregational United Church of Christ. And now, may the power of God and the peace of our teacher, Jesus of Nazareth, go with every one of us, abiding in us, lifting us up, making us whole. Go in peace, pray for peace, wage a little peace, and love one another, every single other. Amen.